What's going on, YouTube family? Tonight we're going to talk about my top 5 baits from the 2016 season, and I'm going to share with you guys also the rods, reels, and retrieve techniques that I use to help me put fish in the boat. And the first bait we're going to talk about is a bait that I used early on in the season when those fish were up pre-spawn, when those fish were spawning, and then again later in the summer. And that was a bait that was really hot to the market. It was a river to sea Whopper Plopper, and I used this bait in 2 different colors. I used it both in this loon color and then in the bone color. So the loon color, as you guys can tell, is black with some white on the sides, and the bone color was pretty much all white with a little bit of red on the tail. And the way I threw this bait was kind of unique. A lot of people are throwing that bigger 130 size. That's the 4.5 or 5 inch bait. This here is the River to Sea Whopper Plopper in the 90 size. So this is a little bit smaller, which is perfect for imitating those bait fish that those bass are really feeding up on pretty much all year round up here in the north. So I really like this smaller 90 size, and it's caught me some giant fish. When I was catching fish on this bait early in the season, what I was doing was targeting boat docks with this. So what I would do is I'd throw it on a 7-foot medium power fast action rod, and I would skip it up under boat docks. I would pitch it up under boat docks. And believe it or not, if you can get this bait to pitch head down, it actually skips relatively decent. So what I would do is I'd basically pitch that bait up underneath the pontoons, and a lot of fish would come out and crush this bait. And what I like about this, and one thing you guys might have seen me do a little bit with a buzzbait later in the season, was skipping docks with that buzzbait. What this allows me to do is have a similar sound, but I can stop this bait and pause this bait on the water. So mid-retrieve or mid-pop, I can stop this bait and it'll make noise, but then I can basically stand it still, and a lot of those fish would hit it when that bait's sitting still. And then as we got into the summer months, what I was doing was using this bait to target fish on big flats. So on big flats on the main lake where those fish would stage up if they weren't deep, I would take this bait and I'd make long casts with it and just really slow retrieve that across those big main lake flats to catch some giant fish. This bait here was my favorite topwater for the season. It's a River to Sea Whopper Plopper size 90, and this is in the loon color. So the rod that I was throwing that River to Sea Whopper Plopper size 90 on, I started out throwing it on a 7-foot medium power fast action rod, and then I moved to throw it on a 6'9" medium power extra fast action rod. And what that allowed me to do was make a little bit more precise skips and pitches around boat docks with that shorter rod. The next baiting technique I want to talk to you guys about, and one that I caught a lot of big fish on this year, was a jig. This is just a 1/2 ounce Arky style jig, and in my favorite color. That's that Magic Craw, which is basically green pumpkin with blue, I don't know, it's like a blue pearl in it. Again, I like pitching and skipping this bait around docks, but I also caught a lot of fish deep on this. I would take and throw this bait out along those main lake contour changes, and that's when I get a lot of my bigger bites on this bait. And I have this paired up. This is a 6'9" Brian Thrift skipping special. It's a medium heavy, and they call it a fast action, but it's actually between a fast and a moderate fast tip. And what that allows you to do is have a lot of bend in the tip of the rod, so you can really accurately pitch and skip that bait. Again, this is only 6'9" long, which allows me to have a lot of control and make really precise pitches and skips. And then I'm throwing it on a Lew's BB1 Pro Z 7 1-to-1, and this is a left-handed model. I like the left-handed model, especially when I'm pitching and skipping, because I only have to use one hand. I don't have to switch hands after I make my pitch and skip. I can make my cast and then immediately have my hand on the reel in case that fish bites it while the bait's falling. Bait number 3, and another bait that I had a ton of success fishing offshore with this season, was a Texas rig 10-inch worm. When those fish are looking for that bigger than average bait, this bait will get you those bigger bites. And I have this rigged up on an Owner Jungle flipping hook. This is a 5/0 size. One thing that I switched to this season is anytime I'm throwing a Texas rig bait, I'm going to almost exclusively throw a straight shank flipping hook. And what that allows me to do, when I snell that hook, it kicks straight out. So when your weight pushes down, when you set the hook on that bait, your hook is going to kick straight out, and that's going to give you a lot better hookup ratio. Also, the way that hook's designed, you have a much wider gap, a much wider area for that fish's mouth to get the hook, as compared to an EWG, an extra wide gap style hook that a lot of people will use. You have a lot more gap with a flipping hook than you would on your standard EWG style hooks. Almost exclusively, and I do this when I'm throwing this big 10-inch curly tail worm, I'm throwing it on an owner jungle flipping hook, and I'm going to snell that hook. That's given me a lot better hookup ratio and helped me catch a ton more fish. The rod that I'm throwing this big worm on is a Brian Thrift Series Fitzgerald rods, 7'2" medium heavy action frog rod. It has a moderate fast tip, which gives me a little bit more delay between that fish eating my bait and setting the hook. The thing with a big worm is that you don't want to set the hook the first time you feel that fish bite, because if you look at that big profile, what's going to happen is that that fish is going to eat the tail, and then he's going to have to come up and eat it again in order to get your hook. So if you set the hook too quickly, what you're doing is you're pulling that bait away from the fish as soon as he eats that tail. So having that little bit slower tip is allowing me to get a little bit more delay in my hook set and allowing me to catch and put a lot more fish in the boat. The last two techniques are techniques that I used mainly for smallmouth this season and have helped me put some giant fish in the boat. And the first one I'm going to talk about is something that is pretty well known for fishing for smallmouth, and that's drop shotting. A drop shot was incredibly key for me this season to put some huge fish in the boat, especially during the summer months. The thing that I really like about drop shot fishing is you can fish it two main ways. You can fish it vertically below the boat if you're marking fish on your graph, or you can make short flips and pitches or even long casts to fish away from your boat. So that gives me a lot of versatility with this bait. It's also great because you can imitate a whole bunch of different forage types. One of the big keys on the Great Lakes here are gobies. So you can use it with a shorter leader to imitate gobies, or you can use longer leaders to imitate bait fish and forage that's living up off the bottom. A lot of times on the Great Lakes I'm throwing a 12 to 18 inch leader on my baits. I could even go longer, especially if I'm fishing for smallmouth that are feeding really heavily on perch or other shiners or bait fish. And then if I'm fishing for bass that are eating on gobies, I'll shorten my leader down to 4 to 6 inches to get that bait closer to the bottom and imitate those gobies and bottom dwelling forage types. And the bait of choice this season, the bait that caught most of my fish, is the Bass Magnet Lures Twitch. In both sizes. Early on, I was throwing the 3-inch size in the Spanky color, and the day that I caught 29.25 pounds, we were throwing this bait here. This is the Bass Magnet Lures Twitch, the 4-inch size in the Clearwater perch color. It's a great perch imitator, and I was throwing a little bit longer leader. That helped me get that bait up off the bottom and imitate those perch really well. And I was targeting a lot of offshore structure, so contour changes, rock piles, and transition areas where it would go from either sand to rock or sand to gravel. That's a lot of times where you'd find that bait fish. And then I had it hooked up with a Gamakatsu G Finesse 1/0 hook, and this is a 1/4 ounce drop shot weight. And I switch between a 1/4 and a 3/8 ounce drop shot weight depending on depth and depending on feel. If you're out there in big waves, you might have to go a little bit heavier. I actually went all the way up to a 1/2 ounce sometimes this season when I was fishing in those really big waves, but for the most part I'm fishing a 1/4 to a 3/8 ounce. And then I run 12-pound Power Pro. This is the vermilion red color. I run it to a swivel, and then 8-pound test Sunline FC Sniper. And then the rod that I'm throwing this on is a custom 7'2" medium power extra fast action rod with a Lew's Team Pro spinning reel. And this spinning reel is a 6:2 to 1. That 6:2 to 1 gear ratio helps me pick up line faster, and it's in the 3000 size. So that 3000 size also helps me pick up more line, pick up more slack more quickly, which is really key when you're fishing around smallmouth that are really feisty and active. And finally, a bait that I developed a ton of confidence in this season was an underspin. I threw this bait a lot in the fall when those fish were starting to feed really heavily. When those fish were feeding on moving baits, I would throw this underspin with the Bass Magnet Lures Shifter Shad and Chartreuse, and then this is the Spin Tricks underspin in the 1/2 ounce size. And what I would do is I'd target similar areas. I'd target that offshore structure, and I'd throw this bait allow it to sink to the bottom, and just really slow roll it. I'm throwing it on a 7'3". This is a Big Bear rod, 7'3", 3/4 heavy, moderate rod. So that 3/4 heavy is in between a medium heavy and a heavy power rod, and then it's a moderate tip. And that moderate tip, it's really a crankbait rod, but it allows me to really play these fish and fight these fish without having to worry about them coming unbuttoned. I have it paired up with a Lew's LFS speed spool and a 6/8-to-1 right hand retrieve, and on 14-pound Sunline FC Sniper. So those were my top 5 baits from the 2016 season. I have all of them listed in the description below, so you guys can go down and check those baits out. If there's any questions on any of those baits, any questions on the retrieves or how I fished them, please feel free to send me a comment down below or shoot me up with a message on Instagram or any of my social media. All of that will be linked in the description below as well, my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. So be sure to add me on there. And as always, guys, I appreciate you watching. Take care, tight lines, God bless.